All right, I want to take a second to clean my lens, first of all. Okay, that's a little better. All right, I want to take a second to talk about Allen heads, and they can be a little bit tricky, especially on Volkswagen, so I want to talk about a couple of tips. First thing is the most obvious. You want to clean the Allen holes out. If you look at a lot of these Allen holes, they get filled with sand and dirt. And if you're putting your Allen wrench in, everything on these Volkswagens is metric, so this is a 6 mil. The others are 5. You want to make sure it actually fits solid. But if your Allen hole is half filled with dirt, you're not going to get all the way in, so you're not going to get full penetration, and then you're only going to get half of this socket actually turning, and it's really easy to strip a Allen head out when you're not cleaning them out and not getting the socket deep enough in. So first thing you want to do is clean it out. Second thing you want to do is strike it. And what that'll do is that'll actually shock the bolt all the way down, and it breaks up a lot of corrosion. So before you try getting your bolt out, hammer it, because it also gets it all the way in. So first clean it, then hammer it down. It'll shock the bolt. And then the last tip I have when you're removing Allen heads is don't do this slow turning stuff. That's a real easy way to strip it out. Do it really quick, and I usually smack it. And doing that all at once is either going to snap it free, or you'll be able to tell it's not going to snap it free and it's going to start getting cockeyed, and you need to re-clean your hole and then maybe even try swapping up to a impact driver and impact driving that out before you strip it out. Next tip on something that can be tricky on Volkswagens is connectors. People are constantly breaking these connectors, fighting with them constantly. The trick I've found is, first of all, push the connector in first, because otherwise you'll actually have tension on the tab. And since the only thing they give you to push this tab is this little plastic thing inside of this divot, you can't really get that much pressure on it. So you want to make sure that it's not tugging on this tab to begin with. So push in, push the tab, and then pull. And if that doesn't work, the last trick is to take a pick tool and come in the back side. And what you're actually doing is you're actually getting in there and you're lifting the tab. There's a little tab in there. So we pick the tab up and then we push the connector off. There's the little tab. So you get in there with your pick tool and you actually pick that tab up, because it's real hard to lift that tab like that with just this little stupid tab. Gotta make sure to take this tin off so that we can get to these two nuts that are up in here on the edge of the oil pan. So the drain plug's actually stripped out on this. I tried taking it out and it's just spinning. I actually got this car from a local tire shop where I was working at the time, so I'm assuming someone there stripped it out. I didn't strip it out. So we're going to drop this pan down full of oil and see if we can do it without making too much of a mess. Okay, we did pretty good. If it wasn't for this second drip tray, we would have had a lot more. We got a small spill under there, but most of it's in the drip pan. The rest is in here. A cup or two is in the backup drip pan. Now we can go ahead and actually drain the rest into our drain pan. I don't know what we're gonna do to get this strip drain plug out, but we'll have to pull it out and figure out whether it's the thread in the pan or the threads in the drain plug, and whether we need to replace the pan. There's a couple of pieces in the bottom of the pan. They're orange, so I would imagine they're probably dipstick. Dipstick on these break pretty often, and they like to go down the dipstick tube. So just a little bit of plastic, no big deal. I'll double check the sump pickup. Make sure there's nothing in there before we reassemble it. Okay, so we've got the stripped out drain plug now. So what I'm doing is I'm smacking the inside of the drain plug that way while turning it to try to get the threads to catch so I can get that out. There, stripped drain plug removed. And you can see how stripped, see there's like no threads up there where it was over tightened. But if we look, looks like I still got all my threads. So I'll just grab a new drain plug and we'll slap it on there and should be good. I'm gonna go ahead and chase the threads with this 14x15 tap. My tap set didn't go big enough, so I had to order this. It was only about 10 bucks. A new pan would have been 50 to 60 bucks. And then a new drain plug is 6. So for 16 bucks, we've repaired this pan. There it is, you see that? That was a little bit of drain plug thread that was left in there. Now our threads are totally clean, and there wasn't much tension on there anyway, so we didn't have to really, there wasn't any messed up threads. We were just cleaning all the old drain plug out of there. So we know that that's all good. So now we can go ahead and put this oil pan back on, fire a new drain plug in it. Okay, so right now we got our pan bolts soaking in some brake clean in an old brake clean can right here. And while those soak, we've got pan off under here, we got the oil filter off, and now to the tricky part that some people hate doing. So there, we're looking at where the oil filter screws on. You see that hex nut? You're just going to take that hex nut off, and that long pipe goes all the way through it, and that oil cooler will come right down, and there's an O-ring on the back side of that. So we'll redo the O-ring on the back side of that oil cooler, and then we can slide that oil cooler back up on there and retighten that hex down, and then we'll have replaced the oil cooler seal. So first thing we'll do is we'll take that hex nut off, get that oil cooler off. All right, the next hurdle we have is we want to pull off this oil filter tower here that actually brings the oil filter from the oil from the block down to the filter. But I got that bolt loose, but this one under here, you see my socket under there. That's the oil cooler gasket underneath my socket there. But that bolt, you can't even see. That hex head back there. That one there. That's totally stuck. And I don't want to strip it out because it's going to be impossible to get in there. So before I strip it out, I made a giant chisel out of this piece of rebar and heated up the end and quenched it so that the end's hardened. And I'm going to try to go in from here and grab the edge of that bolt and shock it enough to try to get it free before I put any more tension on that Allen, and try to kind of give it some encouragement to loosen it up. Hopefully it works. Yep, that worked. Just smacked the edge of the Allen with this chisel. As you can see, it's messed up the edge because it wasn't heat treated good enough, but it was enough to shock that bolt. Enough of that. So we got one more bolt, we'll do that too over here, and then we can get that off. Okay, got the two bottom Allen bolts off. Now we can take this top one off. Now this is loose. Now we should be able to finagle this out. Oh, it helps. Okay, so we got the cooler out. Had to loosen this pipe a little bit by pulling the 10 mil that's down here, so we could move this forward, so we could slide this forward enough to get the cooler tower that's sitting right there, or the cooler and filter tower, forward enough to clear this so that then it could pop up, so the pipe could slide up the center of the oil cooler. So next thing we'll do is this is one of the gaskets we want to replace that could possibly be leaking. These are pretty brittle, and you can see this one's pretty hard. So that would be an easy place for a leak to occur. So we want to replace this hard O-ring. Get rid of that. And the other gasket we're here to replace is this metal gasket. You can barely tell it's here. There it is. Here's the metal cooler gasket, or the cooler for the the gasket for the oil cooler and oil filter. Okay, so now we got these holes plugged. Get that one plugged back up there. We're going to take a wire brush to this to clean this gasket surface all up. It's pretty clean there, but we want to make sure none of this debris gets in between that when we go to replace it. So we'll clean that up real good, and then we'll also give the cooler a clean, and then get that gasket back on there, and then clean up the oil filter tower. If this isn't obvious, the new gasket has these little tabs, so you can poke it onto these little tabs here, so that you can actually hold the O-ring in place as you slide on the pipe through and get that worked in. Unfortunately, the same case cannot be said for this gasket, so we'll have to kind of hang that one on the bolts as we're installing the oil filter tower. Okay, we got those bolts tightened, and the ones right there between the cooler and the actual oil filter tower. I definitely recommend using these. It's basically a long Allen. That back Allen is so close to the oil filter. Okay, we've got the oil pan gasket treated. We've got the pan pre-treated. Smear both surfaces. We've also smeared the block, and the gasket's ready to go. So we'll just align that, and then we can slide under there, put a couple of bolts in, and then run the rest of our bolts and get that torqued down. Brand new drain plug. No problem. Okay, now that we got the pan on and torqued down, we can go ahead and put the stupid dust cover back on. Make sure you put this back on. There, make sure those bolts align. And speaking of the bolts, be very careful with these. Do not lose these. They're special. They're 7 millimeters. And they are not easy to replace, so don't lose those. Now that we got our nut on the back on the oil cooler to tighten the oil cooler gasket down, now we can go ahead and put our oil filter back on. And then we can go ahead and fill it with oil. While we're here, we'll check the timing. There you can see that mark on that plastic cover right there in the center. And it's lined up with that mark right there. And then if you look up over here, this mark is lined up with the on top mark up here. So the timing is correct on this, so we can go ahead and proceed with the valve cover. All right, there it is, VW ABA 2.0 oil cooler tower, oil filter tower, oil cooler gasket, oil pan gasket, valve cover gasket, intake gasket. Not too bad. I don't know why this doesn't have the VW symbol on it. If you guys know why there's no VW symbol on that, let me know in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already. If you like this video, check out some other cool videos in this playlist below. I'll catch you guys next time.